Hello and welcome to another episode of Soul Nectar Show, that show where we talk about all things essence, where we gather around the campfire and we share our stories of connection to that which is bigger than us, to the big mystery, to those synchronous moments of connection and understanding and insight and realization and profound knowing that really guides our life once we start to wake up. And it's such a beautiful journey, it can be anyway, when we look at it through new eyes. And I'm your host, Carrie Hummingbird. I love to bring you some new insights and some new perspectives and viewpoints so that you can be expanded in your understanding of the world and receive some more blessings, because we're all about the blessings here. So I really welcome you to tune in today, and I welcome you if you are interested in exploring your own path and your own journey through life and you just want some community to do that with. You can check out Butterfly Circle. My website is carriehummingbird.com, Kerri, hummingbird.com, and you're welcome to book a discovery call or anything like that. So welcome to the show, and I want to say I have my friend Cecile Edwards with us today. Welcome, Cecile.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. Lovely to be here.
So Cecile is an energy healer. She has a master's degree in elementary education. She studies history, hypnosis, herself, her family, psychology. She's an intuitive, a healer, a womanist, an educator, a mentor, a businesswoman, a traveler, mother, and a wife. And she's juggling the many tasks a woman does while being committed to assisting women globally in their personal growth and parenting awareness. And so Cecile has an expertise working with women, young mothers, and children, youth, for over 10 years. And so there's a lot of really good stuff we're going to talk about today, talking about the urgency also for intergenerational conversations and healing, conversations around sacred and deep care. And so these are the topics that Cecile loves to talk about, and I love this playground. So I'm really excited to have you on the show, Cecile, and to hear your story of unfolding as to how you started realizing what you're here to do on the planet and the role that you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that lovely opening. And yeah, and I love that you use the word playground because I think that's an important concept to move into your ascension with, because oftentimes I have to say, when I started on the journey, it did not feel like play. Okay, anything but, in fact. It was tumultuous, but it didn't have to be that way, and I don't think that it has to be that way for many of the men and women who are coming after us with this knowledge that we have, because we know how to support them because we have been through certain things. And so I stepped into this. I started MommyEvolve a couple of years after I started having certain conversations with people online. So I want to say maybe 2012, I was at one of my jobs.
One of the many jobs.
One of them. Mind you, I was a single parent at the time. I was not married yet. And I was at work and I thought I was having a heart attack. I was having a panic attack, I came to find. Didn't know what a panic attack was. I was accustomed to having massive anxiety. So it was a little bit more elevated than the anxiety that I had before. But I knew that I hadn't been sleeping, that I had a child to take care of that at the time was small. She was about 4 at the time. And, I didn't feel like I was getting the support that I really needed and the nurturance that I really needed to be and a good to myself and good to my daughter, right? Because you have to be good to yourself. And so I had this panic attack. I ended up going to the doctor. The doctor took me out of work. Mind you, I'm in the doctor's office, inconsolable, crying like a baby. My doctor's looking at me, because many medical doctors are not trained to really deal with psychological things. But she did have the wherewithal to say, you need to, 1, not go to work for like 3 months so you can stay home and rest. 2, you need to go see a therapist. 3, the other thing, she gave me some meds to take. And so the best thing was the therapist. I didn't particularly care for the therapist in terms of her methodologies in speaking to me. I didn't feel like we connected, but she was an art therapist as well. So when I got to go into the art studio, that really helped me to open up and understand some things and really free my mind and create those spaces in myself. And so I was with her for a short amount of time. And after that, I had to find other ways to edify myself spiritually. I knew that that's what I needed. I knew that I needed to rest. Okay. Don't discount sleep. Sleep helps your brain to heal, because many of us are dealing with unhealed brains from various traumas and such that we've been walking around with for a very long time. And that's something that I talk about heavily in my conversations. And I know that in some families, you know, in our society in general, people have these terminologies, you'll sleep when you're dead, and these weird things that people say. Like, no, you need to sleep now, because death is not like,
Yeah, you can't integrate everything you're receiving if you don't sleep. That's the
you
thing.
can't. You can't. Yeah, the brain synapses, I don't even want to get into neuroscience and all that, but your brain synapses literally cannot connect. And many of us have ones that just never really made those connections because we just didn't get the level of nurturing that we needed. This is science. So, you know, I'm not making this up. Right? And so, you know, I've been going through this process of unraveling myself and understanding myself and realizing these stories that I've been told and these false identities and ideals and beliefs that I've been living under. And at some point I had to look into my parenting, how I was parented. And then I started to learn about the mother wound and what the mother wound was. And now we think the mother wound has only to do with, oh, my relationship with my mother. Yes, that's a part of it, but it has to do with your relationship with literally everything else too. The earth, your children, your friendships, men, because your parenting is what you develop your sense of the world through, right? So you developed your understanding of everything else through your mothering, how you were mothered. And while we might say, oh, you know, fathers should be present, and that's true. However, we know that the mother has a more powerful force in our lives. It just is what it is, you know? And so this is why I am so adamant about helping women to discover themselves and be okay with who they are. Because studies show, and if we observe enough, we will know that women who take good care of themselves, who don't neglect and abandon themselves, are considered to be women who are the best mothers. It has nothing to do with whether or not they spend every waking moment with their child. It has nothing to do with whether or not they had nannies. They may have that, all of that too. But children will see their mothers as good mothers when they see that their mothers have taken great care of themselves, whatever that may be for that mother, right? And so that tells us that a lot of the things that we think is important for us to do as women to be seen as a good mother is probably false. Right?
Yeah, because they want us to run around like chickens with their heads cut off.
Right. So all the multitasking, and I think a lot of it comes down to, and I just had this conversation recently, comes down to us commanding what it is that we know that we want. I would venture to say that many women would prefer to work from home than to go outside of the home and work, because so many things, more things can function and flow in your home when you are there or close to it.
That's true, but I work from home too, like since the kids were little. Mm-hmm. Like I always worked at home.
Right.
Pretty much.
Right.
But then what I noticed was that they get these weird ideas, like they see you working and they're like, oh, I can't have you right now. It's like, then they get this idea that you're like neglecting them. And I'm like, working. Like,
right.
Yeah, I just wouldn't be here otherwise. Like I just would be away and you wouldn't even think about me. And then I'd be back and you'd be like, oh, mom's home, you know? So there is like, I think it does work though to be home. Don't you? Right. Like it flows better because you're right there. Right. Whatever's going on.
Yeah. And you don't feel like you're split. Like, I don't know. For me, I always felt like I was split. Some women, you know, can work well from home. I think it depends. There's a lot of other dynamics, like how much money you make. If you're
Yeah.
making a great salary and you're working outside of the home, there's certain things that you may be able to do to compensate, but you still do need to spend time with the children, obviously. But I do think that there is a revolution of women returning to working closer to the home. Obviously, COVID has caused many of us to be at home and to see, number one, the things that our teachers may be dealing with with our children, right? It
Yeah, that's
allows
for sure.
fathers to be able to see the level of care that is required for children, right? Because men don't necessarily have the level of uh, responsibility, or is considered to have the level of responsibility sometimes, not all the time, obviously. And so I think that a lot of this is causing us to have some more balance in our lives, and to see what areas we need to release some things and where we need to pick up and bring some more things in, that are going to create a better balance for ourselves and taking care of ourselves. And so, defining self-care, I know we see this word flying around everywhere, right? So self-care is like the word. For me, I had to make a definition. I had to create a definition for self-care, because many of us think that the bubble baths and and those are fine as long as they're leading you to being in connection with yourself, truly in connection with yourself, being able to ask and answer yourself certain questions and things like that. So I define self-care as the spiritual, physical, emotional attention that we pay to ourselves. So how are you paying attention to yourself in those ways? When a feeling comes up in your spirit, how do you manage that? Do you push it to the side, or do you take care of it? Do you handle it in some way? Do you try to debrief it with someone? Do you beat yourself up about it, or do you accept it? That
That's
is
such a hard one for women. Like, at least I know on my own journey that tendency to beat ourselves up.
Yeah. That tendency to beat yourself up comes from the general conversation that we've always heard around ourselves, that we needed to be perfect, that we shouldn't be mad at somebody, that we shouldn't be annoyed by the fact that our children are making noise, or that we couldn't handle, a situation, right? So all of those things have somehow caused us to turn against ourselves. So evolving ourselves, and evolving that inner mother, as I call it, really is a call for you to have full self-acceptance, and knowing that you are the person that can heal yourself, right? And that you are the person that has the answers to whatever it is that is inside of you. Now, of course, that's going to be a process, because you have to look at the different institutions that have filled you with these ideas. So we're in a time now where we're seeing people dismantling all kinds of ideas around what we thought was this and that. And that's basically what we have to do inside of ourselves. So, if you have a certain habit, really looking at when you picked up that habit, who supported that habit, right? All of those things can get you to the bottom of why you're doing that thing, and only through going through that kind of analysis, self-analysis, will you now become conscious and aware that you're doing this thing, and when you're doing this thing, and you can choose to stop it or not. I'm going to be honest with you. Some people don't choose to stop. They like, I know that this happens because of this, and I'm cool with it.
Yeah, I'm going to keep doing it.
Doing it.
I just have this thing where I want to be as loving as I can. But love with kids, it's not always like, it's not giving them what they want all the time. That's not love. Love is like so much more profound than that, in guiding them. And I feel like now it's listening to spirit as to what this child needs right now, listening to the ancestors come in and go, okay, this child needs this. Right. And it might be uncomfortable. Talk a little bit about that, like that tuning in part, and what is love, and what's self-love, and what's love for your child.
That's going to look different for every child. That's the other thing. So if you have multiple children, this is where some sibling rivalries may come in. Maybe, you know, I think sometimes sibling rivalries come in because children feel like there's a limitation on the love that they can receive based on what they do, right? But that looks different for everybody, you know, and I find, and you have to some extent, understand some metaphysical things. I found it very useful to know my daughter's birth chart, astrological sign, you know, the energy she was born under and how that complements me. I found that to be very useful. So I'm a high proponent. I don't personally do astrology, but if you know someone who does, it may be very powerful and useful to get that done. So my daughter is very balancing to me. You know, she is a Pisces. You know, she loves, you know, the water. She's very calm. She has a cool head. She's very loving. She's kind of like, you know, oh, it'll get done when it gets done. And I'm a Capricorn. So I'm very, you know, order and, you know, this and that. So we bring a lot of balance to one another. That's not always the case. Sometimes your child can be constricting to you, or, you know, create a friction.
A friction, yeah.
But that's still good to know, because you'll know how to nurture yourself and then nurture the child. And also be okay with whatever the path is that you two have to take, because everything is not going to be lovey-dovey. And showing love sometimes is allowing things to happen the way that they need to happen.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you really bring in metaphysics into your parenting to understand yourself and then your child and how you need to relate to them based on maybe like what they're here to do, like what their purpose is or what their nature is, or understanding them a little bit better, and then understanding yourself, and then seeing how those things relate helps you kind of navigate the space. Like, why are we having this friction? What's that about?
Right. And so that's part of both of our growth as child and parent, right? If you believe that you came through your parents for a particular reason, if you believe that, then using spiritual means to discover that reason only makes sense, right? Right? So there's many ways to discover that. As I said, birth charts, energy readings, past life readings, we've done all of that. And, you know, with that, you can build a plan or have the consciousness to be able to work with your child in a way. And to me, integrated ways of dealing with anyone at this point, I believe, in this current existence, we have to consider other ways to see our human behavior besides, you know, people are just doing things to do things. There has to be something that is underneath what people do. In fact, yesterday I just received, or someone sent me a document that showed that the government, the U.S. government, is a whole like U.S. government document where it shows that the government did a whole study on astral projection. This was in the 1980s. And there are documents showing that it's an actual thing that can be done and has particular benefits to it when known how to do it in a, you know, controlled way. And so it's, a lot of us want to believe that it's some things are woo woo and things like that. But just look at your family patterns. I promise you, if you talk to your mom, your grandmom, you would see that there are certain patterns in your family. And that's because of an energetic carry through that you've had in your family.
Yeah, so you do work with that. You do work with ancestral healing.
Right. So one, discovering the pattern. So I always tell people one of the things, the most underutilized things in our families that can heal us almost instantly is our stories. Why we don't talk to each other and just get stories from each other is interesting to me. And I do understand and have seen instances where it may be difficult for people to talk about, or they may just not feel like it's important. In fact, I was talking to a woman the other day, and she was saying how her mother refuses to talk about her time living in the South during the civil rights movement. And she was one of the women who worked in restaurants where she could only serve Black people in the restaurant. And her daughter wants so much to learn more about that, how it affected her, what she saw, et cetera, but she refuses to talk about it. She's like, that's in the past. And while I get that sometimes rehashing these things can be very painful, it also can be very powerful to us really getting the full story. And this is why we're so prone to telling stories, because it's ancient. It's the way that we've always stayed connected, healed, is to tell our stories, to learn stories.
I think it's how we make sense of what happened. We put a context around it.
It makes us feel belonging to.
So we can understand. And I think it's important. We're having a collective surfacing of story right now, and feeling and vibration and understanding how history has affected us today. It's important to tell these stories, because if this, like, it's amazing to me that some people don't know some of these stories. Like, really? If you knew this story, you would understand why this is so upsetting, that these things that are happening. It's like, it's important to actually know the historical stories.
It is. It's important. Well, that's why the full stories aren't told, quite frankly. Because if they were fully told, oh my goodness, right? So I can remember as a young student going to college and learning certain things, full stories about certain historical occurrences. And I was like, ready to
they didn't
burn
teach me
everything
that.
down. Yeah, like it was like astonishing that humans could treat one another that way. It's upsetting, and so I can only imagine people who live through it. However, I think there is a quality of it making us not want to do it again, and us being honest about where human behavior can take us, right? If we are not careful. We have to be honest about that.
It's important to know this story, but it's also important because it needs healing. Like, there's a lot of things that are, just because somebody died doesn't mean it went away. Like, it's still in their ancestors, so it's in your body,
DNA. Epigenetics.
It's epigenetics. Right? So until it's healed, it's in your body, it stays there. And then you have these weird reactions. You don't know why you're having that weird reaction. Well, it's because there's something there that needs healing, actually, from your ancestry. So you can't just just sweep it under the carpet and not talk about it.
Right. And I'm so grateful that there's so many healers that are coming up who have the knowledge and understanding to how you can connect with your ancestors and talk to them, right? Because they live in your body. You can literally put your hands over your body and talk, ask questions. It may not come immediately, but you put your hand over your body, over your heart, your left hand over your heart, your right hand over your womb, and ask a question that has been burning. Who was my grandmother? You may get a picture of them, right, in your head. What was their name? And perhaps you can find some kind of public records around them. I know that the DNA tests are huge these days. I personally probably won't ever do it because I just don't trust it. But there's a certain wisdom. You have a lot of wisdom held already in your body. Okay, your cells carry wisdom for ages and ages and ages, and lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes. So you do have the capacity and the ability within your body to work through some things. So yes.
And the ancestors they're always around. They're there to help. So it's kind of like, I had the mother wound. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think I told you I was doing work around that too. Yes. And healing my own mother wound. And as I expressed my feelings towards my own mother, and then also myself as a mother toward my children. And, and like you said, it affects everything. It affects your ability to have successful business and entrepreneurship or whatever else you want to do. It affects your relationships, your friendships. It has like broad reaching effects. And so I did this really interesting theta healing yesterday with a woman who offered it to me because I'm having some challenges like completing this work. And she connected me through my ancestry back like 5 generations to the last healed mother in my mother's ancestral matron line. To umbilical cord me back to the last mother that actually was like good being a mom. Like, it's okay. I got this, you know, like I'm healed. I'm good. I love being a mom. This is great. And so like in the last day or so, I've just been noticing the difference. Like, okay,
Lighter.
I can relax. And then
Yeah.
the patterns are leaving. And as they're leaving, I'm noticing them. I'm like, oh, that's right. I've always felt that way. Like these weird feelings about, like, I remember when my children were small and I was like swinging them, I would have this voice inside of me that was like, this sucks. I hate having to do this, or damn kids, or this is annoying, something like that. And then the other part of me would be like, no, I want to do this. Like, what is that? You know, not being, I didn't have the awareness to know why that was happening inside of me. But now I do. I see it. It's like, oh, that was a pattern I inherited from, you know, from somebody who had 13 kids and was overwhelmed. Too many children went insane. You know, that there is such a thing as too much goodness.
Yeah, that's a great point to point out, because a lot of we have to be aware of the various stories that are going on in our head so that we know which one that is our truth, right? Our truth is that we are the mother that we desire to be, we want to be, right? Not those other things that are going on in the head that are like, you know, trying to override that. And that's something that's very important to understand, because, and oftentimes we can feel it. And I've had the same, where I wanted to be cuddling and nurturing, but I was like, oh God, get away from me, you know, instead of doing that. And it's like, where does that come from? Maybe happened to you, perhaps happened to your mother, right? Or someone in your line. And so that has created a reaction in you, and that happens with so many things. I'm working on my wound around men, that is surrounded around the relationship that I had with women, and the way that I saw them being treated, as well as their interpretation of men. And I know that that lives in me, and so I'm constantly pushing away, you know, positive male figures in my life, because that's what I saw happen all the time, because I don't know
Yeah,
how
and
to
those patterns repeat though, because, you know, I also know that those patterns repeat from the traumas that our ancestors experienced.
Definitely. Absolutely. And it's living in us, literally. And only those things that we have not only become aware of, but created different reactions around, or different responses around, are what are considered healed, are part of our ascension, a part of our gift to the next generations. Because that's the beauty of being a mother. I believe personally that women and mothers are at the forefront of healing this planet, okay, at this time.
Well, I agree with you, Cecile, because there is no greater love than a mother's love.
None. Not only that, but we're talking about the traumas and such, but we also hold that knowledge of a greater world, right? We hold that knowledge of a balanced society. We hold the knowledge of justice inside of us as well. And I do see that that's coming to the forefront. I do believe personally that, again, women going back and being closer to home is a part of that revolution, because now we are better able to educate our children. We're better able to feed them well. We're better able to command things in our communities that we desire, such as, you know, better food, right? Better school systems, if that's what we decide to do, right? So those things are part of the shift that is happening in this world right now. And it's
Because
so,
we're home, so we have to see what's going on. We can't like distract from it anymore. It's like,
exactly.
get home and see what's happening in your house.
Because the home has always been the center of a thriving community. I mean, what queen didn't have a thriving castle and took care of her castle, right? And not just in a way where it looked pretty, but ensuring that it was prayed over, ensuring that, you know, the elements and people that were in there were taken care of. All of those things are part of caring for. That's part of caring for yourself.
Yeah, it's funny because just in the last, so all the things you're saying is so tapped into what I'm going through right now. I actually had this realization that I needed, because I had a client, male client that came to me, and he was like 3 times divorced, and he's trying to figure out why he keeps like sending all these women away and it doesn't work. And his mom paid for the session for him because she loves him and she wants him to be happy and all this. And then what it turned out is that he needed to set boundaries. Like he needed to have a throne for his mom and a throne for his partner, so they each had a place to sit and be in his life. And as soon as he did that etherically, he relaxed, his whole body relaxed, and all the energy relaxed between the women. It was just like, whoa, we could both feel it. And then I was like, wait a second, where's my throne? Maybe that's what's going on with me, is that I haven't claimed my throne. I did all the work. And so I did this long meditation with myself and my ancestors, and they're like, yeah, you've done all the work, so why don't you claim the throne? Like, you were already doing it, so just sit down in your seat. And it's like, oh, all right. So it seems so like it's this mystical stuff, right, Cecile? But it's so real. It makes a big difference.
That's what I call energetic sovereignty, right? So, you said a couple of things that I want to touch on, but that is what I call energetic sovereignty, and that's some of the things that I teach women that I mentor and coach, right? So mindfulness for me is also about what you're building in your energy field. What are you building in your mind? So it could be something as simple as like canceling out some of these visions that you have, right? So instead, I don't care if you have, this is the example I gave before, but if you have, $9 in your bank account, that's okay. That might be a fact, but you can vision the truth, which is that you're a multimillionaire, right? You have the ability to do that. And who's stopping you? As we say, who's going to check you, boo? Okay.
Who's going to check you?
No, who's going to check you? To do that. That is your birthright. That is your sovereign right. And you will notice that once you start doing that, you can do that in your relationships. It's difficult to do because our human behaviors and ego, as we call it, doesn't want to let go of the struggle. Right. So humans, I feel we and I've been the same way, where I felt like everything had to be a struggle. Once I started to let go of this idea that everything had to be a struggle or a fight, and I started to build things in my mind that I desired, things just became so much easier because I was relaxed in my human form, right? Because I'm like, well, right?
It's
so the
true,
other thing,
yeah.
The other thing you said was boundaries. Whether they're energetic boundaries or physical boundaries. Sometimes you need to physically not be in and around things and people. But more importantly, creating an energetic boundary between yourself and a person. And mostly that energetic boundary has to do with how you respond to the person. Because you're going to deal with all kinds of different energies and people. It's just,
Yeah, not take it personally either. Like, that's something that's the last week has been tough. My eldest son is just at that point where he needs to be on his own. Like, he just needs to move.
How old is he?
20.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So he's going to be 21 in a couple months. So it's just like he needs to go. And I was like, I know that, but also this part of me is like, no, like,
is he ready to go?
He is. Yeah,
okay.
he needs to, because we tried it and it just, being here, and it just wasn't, it's not what he needs. And so I actually did a little tarot card reading to find out more for me to know how to be with him, so that I could let him go and let him be free to do what he needs to do without feeling like it was about me. And so as soon as I got this reading, I was like, well, of course, it all makes sense. Like, all the things that were laid out for me in this reading by this person, I was like, you're so tapped in. This is exactly true. I was like, how you get that truth? You just know it's true. Mm-hmm. I was like, that's exactly what he's been saying. That's exactly what he's been telling me. He's been saying he needs that. He needs this. He needs that. He can't be around me right now because he needs to make his own space. And it's not about me being bad or anything. It's just that he needs his own, his own space away from me. And so there's that separation, that thing, that the empty nest thing, which I never thought I would mind. Boy, I mind it. I really mind it. Because you just, like, that's my person, like.
Yeah, I think that's definitely in my view, it's an energetic thing as well as a societal thing, right? And what I mean by that is that I had to actually literally just had this conversation on my page, because I always ask these questions of folks on my page. And I said, well, with the knowledge that we have that the human brain does not fully develop until we're 25 years old, what would you have done differently as a younger person? And what would you do differently with your children or child if you have them? Or if you're a teacher or whatever the case may be. And, you know, I based that question on some observations that I have, some of the things that I personally desire from my daughter. My personal thing is, she can stay at home so that she can explore life until it's time for her to go. And you'll see that in a lot of societies where people don't move out of their house. I lived in Ethiopia. People don't move out of their parents' house until they get married. So they can be 40.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
They can be 40 and at
That's
home.
a long time.
Yeah.
But then if you look at it this way, the Native Americans, many Native American cultures, they would have a one point when their child got to a certain age, like a son got to maybe 15 or something like that, and they go on a vision quest. They send that boy out in like a week, or something, out like no food, no water, no nothing, and just like naked, and go on Mother Earth, and you're just gone, and you just got to go face the earth. That does something with all that masculine energy, all that rebellious, like evolutionary energy that's natural, like for a kid his age. Like it's normal to feel that way and be pent up and be kind of angry and have all this like need to move that energy somewhere. So like who can handle that? Mother Earth.
Right.
She can handle it,
Right. But they end up coming back to their clan.
Yeah, they come back and now they
can process it.
Now they're like an equal, because when they come back from that initiation, they come back as a sovereign member of the tribe with a voice equal to every other voice. It's no parent-child stuff anymore. It's like now you've initiated. Right. And I think we don't have those traditions, and so where does that energy go? Like how do people navigate that? It's sort of like they just kind of, because in our society, we're way too polite for anger and screaming and stuff like that. Like we can't have that. Like that's not how it's going to be expressed. So where does that energy go?
Right. It doesn't, it just gets, it goes out into, it gets mismanaged, through picking up habits that may not be great, such as
addictions,
watching television, playing video games. As you said, finding people to yell and scream at, usually the people that, should be your support system, and whatever else. So you're absolutely right. Rites of passage is something that energy should definitely be channeled into. And so we do have to find ways to hone that in for our youth and do it. You can do it yourself. There's programs out here that do it in different communities. You can create one yourself and be clear about what it is that they have to do. And really it's just a initiation into thinking higher, right? Thinking, so you've crossed the line from thinking like a child where everybody has to do things for you, and now you're crossing the line into thinking as you said, a sovereign being who has to take responsibility for yourself. And
exactly.
Those things. And so we see, I think, an extended childhood. It's not even about whether or not they live at home, because I've taken note that a lot of young people that I've encountered from other countries, Middle East countries, etc., they may live at home with their parents, but by the time they're 21, 20, they're very self-sufficient, very clear about who they are, very, they could live on their own, they just decide to stay at home with their parents. And so we have to look at these kinds of things and decide how to make these kinds of transitions. And again, women being at home, closer to home, okay, are where I feel these kinds of things can be created and brought out more.
And I think we need tribe again. I think we've lost our tribe, our tribal system. And because we don't have tribe, we don't have elders and support. There's so many moms that are single moms. They don't have any support. They got to work, provide. They're the provider. They're the everything. and no support for all these, even if you're a married mom, it doesn't, still it's challenging because you don't have support from your elders as to like, what do you do when XYZ happens? It's like, it almost seems like the way it was structured previously in indigenous cultures still today works a little bit better because you've got a lot of elder support to help
Mhm.
you like figure out the right way to go with, your when you're training, the when you're growing.
Yeah, I totally agree. We have to certainly build a community. When you look at women, we've always rallied around one another to assist each other. After having a baby, women were well taken care of. Now, a woman is in the hospital for 2 days. She goes home to what? You know, to be alone with the baby, right? Whereas in traditional settings, she might have delivered at home and then she had somebody to help her for a few weeks, you know, making sure she eats, making sure she rests, making sure she rejuvenates. All she has to do is feed the baby, right? And that's it. Now we're expected to snap back and go back to work after 6 weeks or whatever this maternity leave is. In fact, I actually decided to stay in Ethiopia and deliver my daughter because I didn't want to come back here and deal with the maternity situation. Because in Ethiopia, which is considered a poor whatever country, you get 3 months of paid maternity
It's
leave.
amazing
Okay? Paid.
because because they understand the importance of the condition of the mother, because the mother's condition is what drives all the child's instinctive behavior.
Yep. That
So
nurturing they get in the beginning keeps them grounded. That's what it does. It keeps them grounded. The closeness to the mom, the ability for the mother to breastfeed and not be stressed, for her to not bring in all these extra energies with her from these workplaces and things like that, that she's now can bring in her space with her child, which can affect the child. All of those things matter. This is why women stay in the house for a while after their child
that's
is
so
born.
amazing because I'm just quickly reviewing back in my mind, like, oh, because I think when we first had my first son, we were still adjusting to like what it means now that you have a child. And we still went out to dinner. Like well, he sleeps all the time. So we just put him in the little bassinet and brought him with us, right? But now I'm going, yeah, but he was aware of all that chaos around him at the restaurant. He was aware.
Mm-hmm.
He would
Absolutely.
look like he was sleeping, but he was aware of all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time I had my second child, we were not doing that anymore because we had two, right? So we pretty much at home. And he tends to be a little more grounded. Of course, his astrology is also that way. So you can't really make rules about it because like they each have their own astrologies, they each have their own life purposes and the things they're here to do and the path they're meant to walk to do whatever their dharma is, right?
Right. That's true. However, you want to mitigate it as much as possible because it's not just about them, it's about you and your healing process, because we know that, different energies can, you know, thwart your healing process as well if you're not aware of it. And so, I mean, I do think that there is wisdom to the idea of just being and bonding with your little one right after having a baby. It's something that has been done, for a long time. Um, and so that's something for women to consider. I mean, I know we want to jump up and go do all this stuff, and we think that we're healed and all of that. But the reality is that you may look healed on the outside, but on the inside there's still stuff that's pulling together. So that's something to consider. And studies have shown that babies can hear things in the womb and when they're born and pick up things and things like that. And so that's something that's why people play classical music and these kinds of things around their children um, to do something to their brain.
Stimulate. Yeah.
Yeah, stimulate their brains and all of these other things. This is why, once they get out of the womb, we do this special kind of wrapping them up because it simulates the womb and they still want to feel like they're in the womb because it's traumatizing to come out of the womb and all of these other things. And so, and it's good for us to just, because when you consider it as a woman, you've been pregnant for 10 months and you just pushed an entire soul out of your body. You need to sleep. I think it's okay.
And you're still a food factory, so
Right, right,
it really takes a lot out of you.
right. So I think I was tired for like 3 years. So I'm just saying.
I think it's so important for young women to really realize that baby instinct, that there's work to be done before you have the kid. Like, you really got to do your inner work before you have a child. Like, and I thought I was doing it, Cecile. I was already in psychotherapy. Like, I was in weekly psychotherapy for like a decade before I had my kids. I thought, oh, I'm good. I'm fine. Oh, did I realize once I finally had the kid, like, all of this other subconscious stuff, like body stuff, like unexplained emotional content things just like came out.
But you know what? You did start to do the work. You did, because if you would have been trying to start from ground zero after
Thank
having a
goodness
child
I didn't do that.
right? And it calls to something that's very important to know, that your journey is not overnight. So, I was having this conversation the other day, and, I was saying, oh, I've gone through this whole process. I've, been divorced and separated for a while. And I said, well, I was by myself for a while now. I've ventured out into dating. I said, I think I've done plenty of work, but I will know once I start really being in a relationship how profound that work is, right? Because we don't know unless we can test it.
That's true. Yeah, it's a little easier dating than like having a baby to test it, but like.
But either way, the work, the proof is in the pudding. It's in whether or not.
Yes.
So yes, can start to do your work. I'm a huge advocate of that, of asking yourself certain questions around your relationship with your mom, getting certain therapy and understanding certain holistic practices, etc. But you still are going to need support and to integrate that information and really be able to embody that information once you enter into that situation. It's like going to school. You go to school, you read all these books, you're like, oh, this is great. Then you go into the workplace and you're like, oh, this is not. So what is this?
Well, it's not exactly what I thought. But there's so many techniques now, Cecile, for healing, like energy healing, ancestral healing, there's heart wall healing, there's like womb healing. There's all this healing. Like, I think younger women have it made now because if they are awake to this, they can seek out these healing modalities and really get started, like cleaning and clearing it all out, so that they become a clear vessel for a baby to actually be formed into.
Absolutely. And be guided by what you're drawn to. Right? So you don't have to feel like you have to do all the things, right? You don't have to do all.
That's like that baby book that's like this thick,
right?
That one that tells you all the terrible things that can happen.
Yeah, what to expect when you're
expecting. Oh,
like that. It's like, oh my.
That book was terrifying.
And forget about. Don't Google anything. Don't. Because if you stub your toe, you're basically dead. Like, don't even. So, but whatever you're drawn to. So for me, I was drawn to Reiki. For me, Reiki, it just really called to me. And now my practice has transformed in terms of, I'm more so into the energetic release mentally, right? And so I literally ask questions that allow people to think more deeply about what it is they think. Okay, why do you think the way that you think? Could this also be true? How do you feel about that? Why do you feel that about that? Right? Those kinds of things are, in my opinion, in addition to, helps, and in addition to other modalities, helps you to really clear your subconscious mind and put you in the practice of asking yourself questions. So whatever modality you do, you always have to ask yourself questions, put yourself in the mindset of asking yourself powerful questions, because those questions will yield answers for you. For you. So
yeah, those aren't I had this meditation this past weekend, working with White Buffalo Calf Woman, my guide for this book, and I got into this meditation with her, and I was just asking a question about my son and everything, and the words that came to me was, your children's lessons are not your lessons, and your lessons are not your children's lessons. Mm-hmm. So we're matched together, like you were talking about, you and your daughter. We're matched together but we're complementary, or we're friction, or we're whatever we need for each of us to learn the soul lesson that we each came to learn. So we're matched up.
You also have your own path.
So if we could just understand that, we wouldn't have to get so upset with each other for being like exactly the thing that we need that we don't want to do.
Exactly. This is what being gentle with yourself, with others, is such a powerful thing. It is such a powerful thing. Because as you said, we all have our paths, and those paths are going to take us in directions that one or the other may not like. Right? But we cannot judge what that means. Like, it doesn't mean anything to you that your child decides to do something that you don't agree with. In fact,
It's really, yeah, it's not personal.
It's not personal. It's not personal. If you imagine if you walked around taking everything personal that your child did, oh my gosh, you would be a mad person.
Exhausting.
Exhausted. Because children, I mean, they're they personify chaos. They're learning. They're growing. And in this society, unfortunately, we don't have that great of an incubator for a lot of our children. You know, that's not to say to take your hands off. But again, the proof is in the pudding. How are you living your life? How are you dealing with yourself, handling yourself? That is the question. How are you, again, stories heal. Like, I tell my daughter stories about things that happened to me when I was younger, just to let her, number one, understand that I'm human, but also let her know that she's going to deal with things. And that's okay. And you can choose to deal with things the high road, the highest result for you. Everything doesn't have to be, a long drawn out process.
Yeah, it's kind of like not always necessary to go the drama way.
No, not at all. Not at all, actually.
There's this certain, seductiveness to it, like what I noticed, in myself and in, sometimes my children. It's a very seductive path to go get in some drama, but it's not, you do learn from it. So there's nothing, whatever, you're going to learn from all of it anyway. And, it gets it's like a little easier maybe to just not go quite so far into that drama. Right.
Because our body gives us clues. So when we, you know what I'm saying? Like, we know, like, all right, I need to stop that. and that's
my
part
stomach
of our
is churning. My stomach is churning, or I can't sleep, or,
that is
my throat is
our
tight.
journey. Learning how to listen to our body's cues. That voice in us that says, you shouldn't do that. Or, oh, you should do that. Turn into that, tune into that. That's part of our journey.
And just because maybe they're not listening right now, doesn't mean that it's not, that seed isn't in there.
That's a great point.
It's in there. It just might need a different voice to activate it. That's not yours.
Or, think about your own self. How many things were told to you when you were younger, and you're like, goodness.
That's boring. That's
right.
So uninteresting. Just
or things you saw that you didn't understand, right? You saw things and you were like, what? Ugh, what is that? Now you're older and you're like, oh, I get it. Okay. It's just, and that goes back to my thought about, and your brain isn't fully formed till you're 25. I don't think that you really start to experience the fullness of life until you're like 30, 35, 40, really. Right? This is why you always hear people in their 40s say, man, this is great. I'm loving this.
Yeah, I kind of hit a wall at 38. I do think, though, it's important too, because I was the good girl. I don't know if I was totally good, but I did tend to conform. I was like, I'll just do whatever I'm in my own way, whatever people tell me is the right path. Right. And so, but at 38, I kind of got to the end of the rope on that. It was like, no, I can't. So I do think it's important to break. It's like, in my experience, that like to really have a way to find yourself without anybody else's influence over like who they think you are, And maybe we're all on different life paths is the other thing, Cecile, I'm wondering is like, are we just all exploring different life paths? Because like I noticed that same behavior in my son, like he also needs that. He needs
Right.
to just be to be like on his own, to have his own artistic being expressed without influence from me, you know?
We all have to go into that wilderness. Absolutely.
He needs to go to the wilds, you know?
We all do. Yeah, that's the symbology, that wilderness of being alone, and yeah, that definitely needs to happen. And I do think that happens at different points in your life, for sure. Of course, we have some people that mature much earlier, and know themselves much earlier, and all of those things. But in general, these are just parts of the cycle in life. Being able to go through that wilderness, separating yourself from everyone, wanting to be around and with everyone, all of those things are a part, and they happen at different points in your life.
Yeah, and it's just like the job of a mother is to be steady.
Be steady.
Just be steady and know that it's okay. And that's, stepping into that throne piece.
And being steady means that you have to know yourself.
You got to know yourself, and you got to
Know
know that you did the best you could. And so that for me was really important. Like as a mother, some other people in my family had already came to the conclusion, like he needs this, but I wasn't there yet because
Yeah.
I needed to do more. Like I needed to dot all of my T's and cross and, dot all my I's and cross all my T's. Right. So I think, as mothers, like we know our children and we know ourselves, and it might, to everybody else, it might look like over the top or whatever, you're going in the wrong direction, but you're the one who knows yourself and your son and your child.
Right. Right. And so you have to trust that. I think it's important though to build a good conversational relationship with your children, so that they feel like they can say things to you, say whatever they're feeling to you, so that you can find a way to help them navigate those thoughts and those feelings. Again, this is why working on yourself is so important, because if you haven't learned how to navigate those things yourself, then you may be either not know how to handle it, or you're going to handle it in such a way that is based on your own limitations. And I've seen this happen not just in parent-child relationships. I've seen it happen in working in the counseling world. I've seen that happen with um, practitioners, healers, therapists, whatever you want to call it, that hadn't clearly processed their own life, or had a lot of conflicts internally with their own life. And so sometimes the advice or the recommendations would be questionable, to say the least.
Well, there is that.
And
Yeah.
something. Mm-hmm.
Also with early therapists and stuff like that, I've noticed that too. You got to learn somehow. So
Right. Yes, you do. You do.
you take your chances. That's why therapists have a mentor, that works with them.
Yeah.
To get them started.
However, I do feel like there needs to be a clarity, I think, around the process, because you're talking about people's lives too. You know what I'm saying? So you have to be clear on how you're interacting with the information based on your own internal struggles. You have to be clear about that.
Totally. You got to, and you have to do your personal work. Like I still have coaches. I haven't stopped having coaches. Like
right. Never ending.
You always have to have a coach if you do this kind of work.
Exactly.
And I feel like moms is the same thing. Like why don't moms need to have coaches? Really?
I agree.
I mean, if we really want to be honest, like moms are the coach. They are the coach for however many children they have.
Generations, basically.
They need a mentor. They need a mentor to help them through that process.
Yes, moms need, because it's what I wish I had. So I, whatever I do, whatever families, I'm a nanny as well. Mothers are always looking for answers for things, or trying to gain perspective, or feel comfortable in whatever their decision is. Right? And we need that.
We need that ear. We need that wise ear.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so
because not all of us have a degree in child psychology or education.
Right.
I mean, if every mom every mom had to go out and get that, I mean, really, we need that. Every mom actually needs some coaching skills, like needs to know how to do that.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And this is part of why I, do what I do, and why I love doing it. Because I know that the impact is far reaching, right? It's not just on the mom, it's on every child that mother or woman comes in contact, because you don't have to have actually birthed a child, in my opinion, to be a mother. You know, if you're a community mom, you're a mom. You know, if you're an auntie that doesn't have children, you're still, you know, a mother figure. You know, so that's there are people are always going to look to you as the woman for certain levels of nurturing, guidance, understanding, etc. And you want to make sure that that's coming from a place of being well developed
Oh,
and healed. So
that is gorgeous. Oh, I felt the love when you said that. I was like, oh, yes, want like the cookies.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so tell us a little bit about, so I know you have your podcast, MommyEvolve,
Yes.
and you interviewed me on your podcast, which is super cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so, how do people get started with you besides your podcast? What else do you have that people can get started to get to know you, or to start to figure out if maybe you're a person they want to work with?
So I have the Mommy Matters podcast, which you can find on all of the podcast channels, iTunes and Google Play and all of those things. And so Mommy Matters talks about different mommy matters, and also shows that mommies matter, right? Through giving different tips and tools and things like that to help you navigate motherhood and plan and prepare for motherhood as best you can, because I mean, you know, it's life. And you can find me at my website, www.mommyevolve.com, where you can find my different services there, services and products. And so I have meditations, for example, inner child healing meditation, one that's very playful and fun. I have a gratitude meditation with mala beads that is very will help you. I call it the quick self-care practice, right? So some of us say we don't have time for self-care. So this is literally a 20-minute self-care practice where you can get in tune with yourself. The mala beads are beautiful. They're made of rose quartz, which incites love in your energy field. So you'll love that. And as well as my other services. I do coaching at this time. That's my primary thing, coaching and speaking classes, etc. Right now, I'm actually, I have a class coming up July 20th, and that is called Evolving the Self. And that is I want to say foundational class for people who want to be introduced to me. If you don't sign up before the 20th, it will be on my website where you can download it. So that's going to be a fun and interesting and interactive class, because I bring in things talking about history. I mean, neuroscience, I talk about all of the things, right? Because I'm not the type of person that can separate these things. I feel like they all just work together. And it really does help and heal people when they understand these things. And so those are some of the ways. Of course, I'm on IG, Cecile Edwards, MED, Facebook, MommyEvolve, and yeah, you can find me in all of those places.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being on the show and telling us your story and contributing your wisdom. I really appreciate you and taking time out to come with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed my time and talking, and I hope to hear comments and questions from people after this. Like, keep the conversation going.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in lieu of that, and right in line with that, I should say, if you enjoyed this interview and you got something valuable out of it, please leave us a nice review. Give us some stars on iTunes and YouTube, and give us a rating. And you know, share this out with people that you think would benefit from the messages that Cecile was sharing, so that she can be connected with people that she's meant to work with. So please help us with that. We appreciate that. And I'm going to give people kisses on the way out. Would you like to join me?
Sure.
All right, here come the kisses, people. Get ready, get ready. We love you so much. We're so glad you were here. Kisses.
Take them all.
See you. Take them all.
Bye.
Bye-bye now. See you next time on Soul Nectar Show.